Carolyn Langley. There is a recommendation for 3A and 3B under the budget section 10A, and it will be revised, and for simplicity, she'll explain it when we get to it. Okay. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest? Councilor or Mayor Joining.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have three, actually. Item A3818, that is a banner request coming forward by Mr. Len Sheldrick. It has to do with Evans Ride for Autism. It's the 10th anniversary, and as I am the honorary chair of Evans Ride, I'm disclosing conflict of interest with that. B, A4018, same, it's a sponsorship portion of Evans Ride for Autism. That's report RFDT 0618. And C, which is A4118, that's report RFDT 0718. That has to do with the fire department budget, and recommendation 6A from the report regarding the fire department capital budgets. And that is a conflict of interest, as my brother is a member of Station 1, West Lincoln Fire Services. Thank you.
Seeing none, no others. Appointments tonight. Procedural bylaw, section 6.5, scheduled appointments and or presentations. Each scheduled appointment or presentation shall be allowed a maximum of 10 minutes exclusive of time required to answer questions from the members of council, and some exceptions may apply. And we have one appointment tonight. Item A3518, Mrs. Brenda Pickvance, road improvements and budget. If you'd like to come forward and state your name, and when you're done your presentation, could you please leave a copy with the clerk?
Brenda Pickvance, good evening. A quick sidebar, if I could, having to do with the road allowance settlement. If Township could let us know what's going on with the tree planting portion of that, where we are in terms of approval. I know there was something left with the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, and has that all been ironed out, and will we be proceeding with that shortly? Okay, I acknowledge some gravel on my road after a very long time. Is more coming for the rest of the road? We all know gravel is a Band-Aid solution. Sooner or later, and in most cases sooner, it just sinks into the clay. And when I think about decade after decade, gravel put down, disappearing, so much money wasted in terms of the gravel itself, trucking, grading, calcium applications, the salaries of the workers involved in the process, and so on. Gravel or mud roads are not compatible with personal use vehicles. I think we're all totally aware of the cost of vehicles out there today and the wear and tear that takes place on them on roads such as those. They are also not compatible with walking or cycling, nor are they compatible with seniors or a person with a disability. Everyone needs hard-surfaced roads. To say rural infrastructure is poverty-stricken would be an understatement. Looking at the budget, we're using more of the road allowance settlement to fund a couple of projects. That money will run out, and then what? Are we going to be able to do anything with the roads? A $172,000 grant from OSIF, really a drop in the bucket when you think there is a roads needs study that said $48 million was needed to bring these roads all up to snuff. The money that should be coming from the community fund, hopefully, should have at least been divided between rural infrastructure and recreational facilities. Looking at the budget again, I think we can already see stress cracks appearing in terms of long-term capital expenditures. If I'm going to be looking at accumulated tax increases, it should be for rural road improvements. A recent council meeting focused on tweeting items for the community rooms in the Mears project. Meanwhile, some of us are sloshing around on a mud road if it rains, or being bombarded by dust if it's too dry. So, two completely different worlds. Rural folks, I don't know. We're tired of being ignored, treated as second-class citizens. Tired of being asked to sit at the back of the bus. I sometimes wonder if the sign out front should say Smithville instead of West Lincoln. West Lincoln has a very unique situation. It's huge geographically, but small in revenue. And the network of roads is tremendous. No one is denying that. It's a very unique problem. I wonder what the Niagara region's perception is of West Lincoln. A nice rural community, good growth potential, a new rec center coming. Do they have any idea of the rural infrastructure problems? A good portion of our taxes go to the region. I do not believe rural folks get much value for their dollars. I am going to refer back to a council meeting that took place in April of 2017. Regional Chair Caslin was at that meeting. At that time, Councillor Rayner talked about rural infrastructure needs and that perhaps we needed to look at some way of adjusting the regional portion of taxes. Chair Caslin's response that night was, "We're listening." That window of opportunity was not seized. Well, it is certainly time to start a dialogue. If the region can look at tax exemption for the Niagara Regional Housing property or the equivalent thereof, then West Lincoln can certainly start a conversation on rural infrastructure needs. I believe it'll take courage and humility to put forth something, but the time is now. Can we at least get the idea out there? No doubt West Lincoln will have to offer something up as well. Are you willing to see rural tax dollars be channeled into rural infrastructure? Only with concessions from the municipality and the region can a case be made to look for more money from the province. Don't consider it impossible. Somehow, rural West Lincoln needs to be acknowledged and acted upon. Thank you.
No, just a question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Director of Public Works, Mr. Julian. Off the top of your head, Brent, how much money has been, in this past 4 years, spent on rural road repairs through West Lincoln?
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Trombetta, I don't have that full information in front of me. I do have some information from our operations manager, I can tell you that last year alone, just in operating for rural was just short of 2.5 million. That's operating, not the capital. The capital, there were, in the last 4 years, there were a couple of years where it was going off memory, but close to $1 million. And of all the road capital that's been spent in that period, there's been one urban road.
Okay.
The rest are rural.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Thank you, Chair.
I'll send one in to Carolyn.
Good evening, Rob Cosby, 5969 Concession 7 Road in West Lincoln. Good evening, Chair and members of the Finance Administration Committee. I've read through many of the budget documents and attended the previous committee meeting when the proposed budget was released, as well as the budget open house presentation where I had the opportunity to ask a few questions revolving around the budget for this year. I'd like to make a few comments for your consideration tonight in your discussions, and these are in no particular order, but these are just things that's come to mind by looking at this. First of all, I support the addition of 2 new workers in the Public Works Department, truck driver positions as they're called. I really feel that the department's been short-staffed for many years, and this maybe is a reflection of sometimes when in rural areas we get frustrated that maybe the grass isn't cut enough, or you know, a snowplow doesn't show up when you think it should, or grading, whatever. I think it was put quite simply by the Director of Public Works at one of the meetings when he said, quite frankly, he says, I got 15 pieces of equipment, only 8 operators. And I think that shows in a nutshell that there's a lacking of people to operate that equipment. So I think that that should be seriously considered to be put into the budget for this year. I support the funding of the 3 road resurfacing projects from the Road Settlement Fund, but I support that in principle. And the reason I say that is, my question for you to consider is, are these the next worst roads in the township that were identified through the roads needs study or by Public Works? Or are these roads that were chosen as a result of a motion that council put through last year to move funding from roads that were supposed to be scheduled in Ward 2 and were going to be looked after by the funding, the money that came from the wind turbine group? So my question is, we spent money on a road needs study to identify roads and the degree that they needed to be worked on. If these roads are the next ones that are in line, then fine. If not, I kind of question that, because I'm thinking that we should be looking at roads no matter where they are in the township. That if they need it, then that should be, those the ones should be in priority. So I just want to put that out there. I don't know which way it's going. I'm just asking that question because I know that decision was made last year. The other thing that I would be as bold to suggest is that after you take that money out of that roads settlement roads reserve for resurfacing this year, if you go ahead with that, the reported balance in that fund is $863,658 according to the document I read online. I would suggest that because that is, I call it found money. Reason being that you negotiated a settlement based on the amount of roads that were damaged, and you were able to tender those repairs, and you got a good price for it. So you've got some extra money there to play with. I would suggest that because, in my opinion, the roads are deteriorating faster than that money's ever going to accrue interest in any account, that maybe that's a good place to start this year, is to take that other $800 and some odd thousand and put it into the road system. It'd be nice if some of that was concentrated towards building up more of a base in the gravel roads, but I would put that out to the Public Works Department to say, where does that money need to be spent most? And let's get the job done, because roads aren't going to get any cheaper to fix, and they're certainly not going to get any better sitting there the way they are. The other thing that I saw was, I'd like to note that the paperwork I was looking at, that there was an 11.83% decrease in the roads operating budget. Now, I'm going to assume that that's a reduction based on the realignment of accounts this year with your new bookkeeping system. I hope that's what it is. Clarification would be appreciated. And lastly, I'd like to comment on the deferral of the fire department capital purchases that was suggested by Councillor Ganand for a year. And in fact, what I see now proposed is a delay in the purchase of the Station 2 pump by 1 year, and the tanker purchase is delayed by 2 years. Our fire department does an excellent job protecting the township, but no matter how well their equipment's maintained and operates, the replacement timelines are dictated by a higher authority, and I think it's underwriters or whatever, fire marshal's office, I don't know. But anyway, and I understand that can be overruled by the local council. The risk of this happening is that the rating that is assigned to this township by that higher level protection rating, could that be jeopardized? And in doing that, is there a possibility that would jeopardize the insurance rates to our especially our rural people, when we've got to rely on tankers to supply the water for rural fire protection? So I asked that question, and I think that councillors, you should assure yourselves as well that if you're going to defer that and put some of that equipment that's going to be in service past the 20-year limit that's suggested by the higher authorities, that we make sure that that's not going to jeopardize anybody's pocketbooks. I'm not concerned. I think the equipment the fellows are using is quite dependable, but we don't have that choice of what that timeline is. That's kind of something that's etched in stone above our control. So I would really like to see that looked at, and and considered in your deliberations tonight. And the only other comment I'd like to make, and it reflects back on the previous presenter. This township for many years, back 10, 20 years ago, had a program in effect where they were consistently every year putting aside money and tarring and chipping, building up and tarring and chipping so many kilometers of road. I don't know what it was only a few kilometers, but it was getting done. If I think back to when I was a kid, there was a lot of gravel roads in this township and very little tar and chip. And I think the township did a wonderful job back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s at getting some roads hard-topped. But that has kind of fallen by the wayside. And I kind of wonder, we have a bigger tax base in this township now than we had back then. We managed to get it done then. Why is that program now fallen by the wayside? I mean, a lot of us on the back roads, we said, you know what, we're not going to pave this year, we won't be next year, but we know sometime it's coming. And this last few years, I start thinking to myself, you know what, I guess maybe it's not coming. But I think we should find out why and try and fix the problem. Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few comments. Mr. Cosmic is always a good presentation every budget time, and it's always informative. I do agree with the 2 truck drivers as well that he suggested. I think that is a good asset for the township. Just to answer, I'm not going to be able to answer all Mr. Cosby's questions, but I think he referred to one, how we were allocating money to certain roads. That was also, that money that was getting allocated to that specific ward was for the roads that were damaged by the 5 wind turbines that was originally done in Ward 1, that those roads never got looked at. There was no road use agreement fund to fix any of those roads, so that's why some of that money and those roads that were slated in this budget was determined by our director, as it was a necessity that these roads were really damaged from the wind turbines and the 5 that were out there, and that's why those roads have been specifically picked for that inside that budget, because again, those roads were abandoned once the 5 wind turbines went up there. So I just wanted to make that a point, comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you. With regards to Mr. Cosby's comments, I appreciate him coming every year. He spends a lot of time in detail going over his passion is roads. I know it is. But his comments that he made today in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s with regards to a lot of tar and chipping going on, there was a lot of aggressive tar and chipping done from 2003 to probably, I don't know, 2008 or something. I was an alderman at that time. There was a lot being done out in the areas. But since the last probably 8 years, there hasn't been anything. The only thing that was actually tar and chip was kind of strange. Caister Center Road, the asphalt was peeled off and they tar and chipped it in the fall of 2014, which was quite a mess. And then in 2015, we paved it from 16 Road all the way to 65, and now it's back to where it should be, and it's an excellent road. But yes, there was an aggressive one at that time. And councillors in Ward 3 actually acknowledged the fact that that Ward 1 had a tremendous amount of what we called mud roads and assisted us in trying to get it done. That was the point, that it was done in the past and it hasn't been done much in the future. And Mr. Cosby has a good point. It would be nice if we could get back on track and do it again.
Sorry. Thank you. Is it there? I was going to wait and speak about this later, but my point is very brief. I talked with our director of roads, of public works, and I know that other councillors have got these numbers emblazoned in their mind, but if we look at our capital budget, it is intended that we are going to spend an awful lot of money over the next 10 years on transportation. Our roads, our public works director also said at the budget presentation that this was a very substantial budget. It was one of the highest we've ever had, that 50% of the capital budget for the year coming is going to be spent on transportation infrastructure, and that 80% of that is going to be spent in rural infrastructure. Now, I'm not talking about where the funding is coming from. 85, I apologize. Better yet, I did listen, though. I was listening, at least partially. And I don't want anyone in this room to leave. We can argue what roads, where it is or what it is, but we have turned our mind. And if we look at the entirety of the capital budget and how we plan to phase it, what we plan to do, we are paying attention and we are putting money where roads and infrastructure has to be done. So I'm not sure what service level we want to decide on tonight, if we want to have paved roads throughout the community, and then which one will go first and which one will go last. But I don't want to lose the point that 85% of the 50% of our capital budget is going to transportation enhancements.
Thank you, Councilor Tito.
Good evening. Ross Murray, 25 Streamside Drive. My comments are going to be on the budget, but more on a macro level. Going through the budget details, there was 4 items that stuck out for me. The first being the town's reserves are going to be drained by $822,000 in 2018, which is a significant amount of money. And I'd be interested in knowing what percent that is of the total town reserves. The second item that stuck out was that starting in 2019, the capital reserves are projected to have negative balances for every year through 2019, resulting in negative balances of $8.3 million in 2019. And the report commented that as a result, capital projects may be deferred or the town be required to incur long-term financing. The third item that stuck out to me was that salary and benefits represent approximately 69% of the total operating budget. The total budget for 2018 was $7.8 million. Salary and benefits totaled $5.4 million, which leaves $2.4 million remaining for all the other operating expenses, which isn't a lot of money. So having said that, I am struggling to understand a 2.3% tax levy. Because in my mind, there has to be some significant increase in revenues or a decrease in services or long-term debt. I don't know which it is, but so if somebody could comment on that, I'd appreciate it. The last comment was just a minor item, but it just stuck out. There was a line item in the capital budget for an expenditure of $24,000 to paint the town hall lobby. I'm looking at the town hall lobby and I'm wondering how that's going to cost $24,000. That's my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the month of February, Station 1 had 15 calls, Station 2 had 5, and Pelham down at the East End had 2. Pretty quiet month for February. Nothing in fire prevention, nothing in apparatus fleet. We did have Grimsby up for mutual aid call for a house fire on 16 Road, and we did mutual aid with Hamilton on the Westbrook border. And lastly, Family Day, Station 1 and Station 2 hosted the breakfast and lunch upstairs. Well attended. The guys played a hockey game, charity game with the minor hockey coaches, which the guys won in a shootout, which was kind of fun. But great day was had by all. And that's a pretty quiet month.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say, because they're in the gallery, it's a tragedy that happened to Anne and Ed, and I just wanted to say, it's a bad thing that happened. And has anything been sought out for these serial arsonists that are going around? Any word coming down, Chief, about any of those things going on?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Trombetta. Yes, I talked to Tim Carter down from the Niagara Regional Police. We haven't got together yet because of scheduling issues, but we are meeting hopefully before the end of April to start talking about some of the stuff that's happened up at the West End.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
I have only one comment, and that is, I know we don't have it in this year's budget, but as we look at our downtown, what are we calling it, community improvement, we look at money from the region to try and enhance the buildings in downtown. But we may want to look at something that puts an arch, something like what other municipalities have, like Grimsby and various other places, that identifies the start and the finish of the downtown area. But not only that, gives a great place for a banner to be that is much more obvious. And the reason I say that is, when I was reading this, I was thinking about how there will be competition for wanting to put banners up there. And I know we have a dangling participle out there about the historical committee, isn't it? Heritage Committee, that wants to put up some pictures, some photographs in a rather substantial size to acknowledge our past. And I just think that it's going to get kind of complicated, and there'll be people who are competing on it. If we did think about enhancing our downtown, not just with the benches or having our shop owners do it, but we looked at something like that, we would also be able to give a proper place for a banner such as this to be. So I say it for us to think about for next year. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is an appropriate item to have here because this is the region looking for whether or not they should download this particular service and put it onto our tax, onto municipal tax rates, or whether or not it should be at a regional level. And really it's taking it out of one pocket and putting it in another, but it's about the amount that gets paid by each level of government. And since we have no real presence of Niagara Regional Housing of any, we have some. I don't want to quibble about those few units that we do have in West Lincoln. We're not impacted at a local level, but our residents would be burdened if our taxes were to go up. And the regions were established. When I look back at the Regional Act, the regions were established for services like water, water supply, water purification, sewage processing, official plans, social services, and housing is part of social services. And I would find it inappropriate for us to be to have to exempt social housing, one way or another, you have to pay, either increase their budget or whatever, but to suggest that they should be, that we should be exempting them would say that that's the wrong place to put the exemption requirement. It should be at the region as part of the social services budget, and for that reason, I commend our staff for the recommendation that they've put forward and how we should handle this. So I hope that the region does pay attention to the way that we and other municipalities are going to do it, because bigger isn't better. Belonging at the region is where this is, and I guess as a community of municipalities, we should pay our proportionate share based on assessment, but it shouldn't be that we have it downloaded to us when it's a social service that belongs at the upper tier. That's my thoughts.
So this is a question for Mrs. DeFilippis. So we are a community of communities, and we do have to pay into many different Niagara Regional services. In your opinion, Mrs. DeFilippis, do you agree with the fact that we should be paying our fair share into social services for Niagara Regional Housing?
Through you, Councillor Bell, to Mayor Joyner. I want to clarify an item that's also in this report before I respond, in that this was originally brought forward to Regional Council in 2016. And since then, there's been a lot of talk about additional provincial and federal funding towards affordable housing. So the region wants to finally settle this topic, because in trying to make these properties municipal capital properties, they would be exempt. But one of the major problems with that is that there are other providers of affordable housing in West Lincoln that are not owned regionally. They're provided privately. So then there's this whole question as to what are we going to provide to them? Sometimes it's an apartment building with 2 units that are affordable housing. So it's a really complicated way of trying to solve a problem that we do know exists. We all pay for affordable housing on our regional portion of taxes, everybody. So as area treasurers, what we talk about is, if you need more money for affordable housing, call it what it is. Increase that budget line, and don't try to do these other things to make this exempt and that exempt, because that just complicates matters. So simple is better. So that's what we're recommending. That answer? Yeah. Okay.
So through you, so that is the decision through area treasurers. They have come to that conclusion that they won't be agreeing with the region's downloading of this.
So every council makes their own decision. A lot of the area treasurers are under the impression that of making them these municipal exempt properties complicates matters. And what I got out of it the most is that you're getting 2 levels of affordable housing now, those owned by the region and those that are done privately through other grants. And those ones done privately through other grants are still assisting people that need it, but they're not going to get this benefit. So then you're going to have them wanting to apply. And a big problem is that MPAC, who does the assessments, they don't even know which units it is sometimes. So it's just really complicated. So if you want to help the problem, there's other ways of doing it. Press the province for the funding, press the federal government for the funding, or if it's needed, increase that budget line. We don't think that calling these capital municipal properties is the answer to it.
Okay, thank you.
My question's also to Director of Finance, through you, Chair. Would it also be fair to say that we may in West Lincoln have a disproportionately low actual units? We might be affected, to say the least, but as a region, other municipalities may be picking up the slack for placements that we can't make, so perhaps it might be just fair that way all around too. I'm sure that as we grow as a community, we'll do our fair share of growing, but right now, it sounds like we only have a couple units, but I'm sure St. Catharines and Welland, and they're taking the lion's share of this, but they also have the lion's share of that. So this would, in that sense, create a much more fair environment, because if it was taxed at each municipality level, St. Catharines and Welland would have to pick up a bigger tab than perhaps us. So that is that the case?
Yes, you're correct. The larger urban municipalities, Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, Welland, they have the bulk of the affordable housing. In West Lincoln, we don't have any of these actual properties. Ours are done privately through other types of nonprofit organizations, but people do benefit from it. It's just when they would not benefit from the scenario where those properties became exempt.
So in effect, it would be fair to say that we're seeing this this challenge of affordable housing more regionally. We're doing a little bit above and beyond our particular share in order to share that load together with the rest of the region. Just because we don't have the units and other municipalities.
I think, the region allocates their share of the property tax based on assessment. And we all know West Lincoln's assessment is growing. So yes, we're paying for a portion of affordable housing, and it's probably not all coming to West Lincoln, like a lot of services that we pay for.
Okay.
Definitely.
No, okay. I've got my answers. Thank you.
Okay, just a bit of clarification further to what Councillor Bylsma is saying. There are many residents from West Lincoln area that have to go elsewhere to find affordable housing. We don't have much here. You're absolutely correct. But I would hate for people to think that that we're not providing for the people who do. We have many people who have to go to Grimsby or Lincoln or even into St. Catharines or whatever. And West Lincoln Community Care is also helping several residents of West Lincoln at this point in time with managing the costs of things because we don't have affordable units. So just a little bit of a clarification. We're not, we have our share of problems, we just don't have our share of homes. So thank you.
Real quick, I guess the issue here is not about where the houses are and how long the list is, because it's 5 years, and that's for all of Niagara. My issue is everybody asks what's the right way to allocate taxes, and the province has decided that MPAC will assessment, and that's how we all get charged at our house. We're part of a community called Niagara, and the Niagara region is the social service provider for all of Niagara. Is that correct through you, Mr. Chair? So all I'm saying is social services are a social service. They are part of the whole supportive network of health care and base funding and housing. So I'm not saying we shouldn't pay. I'm saying that it's appropriate, since it's a service delivered from a regional level of government, that it should be paid for by that level of government. And as Mrs. DeFilippis has pointed out, the issue of the appropriateness of showing the true cost of that housing should be that the budget at the regional level should be increased by the cost of taxes and then allocated out to everybody in every municipality so that we can all support a social service that's important to our larger community. And I think that's the appropriate way for this to happen. And I think Mrs. DeFilippis has said, put the taxes on with the cost of the house and the upkeep of the house and allocate it out to the 12 municipalities. That's the point I was trying to make with my original statement, is this is an appropriate methodology that has been recommended by the treasurers and by our own treasurer. Thank you.
I just want to clarify one thing through Ms. DeFilippis, like good Mr. Chair. So this is actually, the way you've written it, this is contrary to what the region's actual motion or recommendation said. Is that correct? I'm having trouble understanding this.
Councillor Bell, the region gave, I believe, 5 options, 5 scenarios. This is one of the scenarios, definitely. So one of the scenarios is not making them municipal capital properties. Instead, look at the actual budget affordable housing receives and work with that budget.
Okay, thank you. Clay, this is my conflict as well, Mr. Chair.
Doesn't matter. Mr. Chair, I think this is another work in process that we probably aren't going to get to, but I noticed that the effective date of this policy is December 3rd, 2002. Pardon me. And I find it very, very, I read this and I was noticing that we still have $1,700 of unallocated funding for this particular category. But more troubling than that was the fact that other municipalities either have a subcommittee of council or in committee go through the applications and come up with the recommendations. And I would say a consideration for next year would be that we should have some way of looking at the actual applications, looking at the services that are provided, looking at what it is that wants to get done by each of these groups and determining what it is that they need. Whether it's the hall boards or because I noticed that we didn't give the hall boards their full requests, yet those are volunteers that are trying to keep our facilities running. And we didn't do that. We didn't give all of the cemeteries what it was that. Well, we run no, we don't run those cemeteries. Sorry. And then we had increases, which was great because of the loss of Poultry Fest. We were able to reallocate some money. And there, I feel somewhat troubled. And I've said before that one, I have people in my family are associated with 4-H, but no one in my family benefits from it. We volunteer to it, and any children that I'm related to are too old or too young to belong to 4-H. So I have a great kinship for it, much like other people do, but I don't feel uncomfortable speaking to it. And I feel that some of these grants are half of the allocation that was asked for, and we really now put ourselves in a bit of a pickle to try and discuss whether or not we wanted to change any of those grants. And we still have money left over. So I really would like for next year that during the budget process, and Mrs. DeFilippis and I have had this have a bit of a conversation on this, is that we should, like many other municipalities around us, have an opportunity to look. First of all, the policy should probably be updated or reviewed, because some of these grants now, you wonder if they actually qualify if you stick to the strictness of the policy it's there. But rather than going through that, what I would say is I would be willing to support what's here for this year. But I really think that we should have it before the committee of members of this council to allocate it, so that we don't get to this place and then say, well, let's take $100 off here, or let's give this guy another $100. It could leave the community thinking we don't value that particular service. But that's all I'm going to say for now. I know we have $1,700 left over, and I'm sure we'll find 15 things to spend that on. But I just want to point out the fact that it's time for us to look at this, and time for us to annually determine how we would like to see it spent.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chichok stole a little of my thunder, but I also have had this conversation with our Director of Finance, and last year was the wrong time, and we were about to change our budgetary system and our financial system, and so I kind of left it alone. But for, again, I also support it as it is for this year. But looking forward, I would very much like to see the amount that's allocated to cemeteries in particular spread more evenly between those cemeteries that are applying. We all know that it's volunteers who look after those and are working very hard. We know that some of the mainstream churches are either closing or are struggling. And I think that in fairness, we need to look at finding a way to proportionately give out those amounts. So I think a committee looking at that, as Councillor Chichok suggested, might be the answer. I hadn't really thought of that. I just thought that we needed to look at how we're giving out that money. Having been years ago on the other side of it, I know that when you send in your grant application, you're hoping that they'll give you every cent you've asked for because it's always necessary. And I know that that every cemetery faces straightening of markers and dips in the ground and whatever, and it's very costly to maintain those. However, we do appreciate the work that's being done by those volunteers, so I think we need to look at how more fairly we can distribute those funds in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I must point out too, as well as being the honorary chair of Evans Ride, so for which I've already declared conflict of interest. I'm sorry? I am declaring another conflict of interest in this Madam CAO. Okay, so also sit on the board of directors for the Christian French Child Advocacy Center. So it was all encompassing in one conflict of interest. Thank you.
through you to members of the committee, before we proceed with discussions on the budget, an amendment to extract the conflict items that Mayor Joyner has is in order. So if we could have a mover and a seconder, the motion was on your agenda. It's recommendation number 2. And once we dispense with those extractions, we can then talk about the budget with the exception of fire. So we would need a mover and a seconder for recommendation number 2.
Mr. Chair, would it be appropriate for us just to add that to the motion as another recommendation, and I'll move that as well as the rest of the budget? So in other words, all of the recommendations as written, plus the fact that we exclude those items which are a conflict for Mayor Joyner?
Through you to members of the committee, you can do it both ways. We've traditionally done it this way with an amendment to remove them.
Whatever way you want. I'm happy to include it. Yep.
So we'll move her in a second.
Council Chichak, Council Belsma. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, you've heard the recommendation of the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment?
Extraction. The extraction.
I hesitated.
All those in favor of the answer?
Original motion without fire.
I think we're at discussion on that one.
So now, now we go back to the original budget motion. Any questions, comments, Council Goldsmith?
Thank you very much. And my thanks and congratulations to staff for coming forward with all the information contained in this budget. They're very comprehensive documents, and I really don't want to. I have no need to micromanage or pick apart small details, but in general principles, one of the concerns that has been very consistently raised over the course of the year, and let me preface that by saying, generally speaking, council responds, unfortunately, like most organizations, to squeaky wheels. Those areas of concern that citizens raise, sometimes it's in the nature of the high taxation, sometimes it's in the nature of services. And if I were to draw with a broad strokes in the course of this past year, or even the past 2 or 3 years, the majority of the complaints have been with respect to service on the rural roads. I think that's fair. We had another presentation this evening, but certainly my inbox has a broad array in terms of topic, but in terms of quantity, it generally focuses on service to rural infrastructure. And so with respect to that, the first thing that I wanted to say is that I'm in support of the extra manpower necessary to put towards what I feel is a small correction in the understaffing, or the staffing shortfall, maybe is a better way of saying, in the area of public works. I think the two, now they're classified as truck drivers, but they're basically 2 more bodies working in that department will, I see as be an improvement in dealing with road repairs, ditching, clearing of sight lines, and grading, all those kinds of things, and that is a form or a category of regular source of complaints in the rural communities, and so I strongly support the additional 2 men there. One of the things that women, sorry, yes, thank you, people, yes. One of the areas that we discussed prior, some of the prior public works meetings, and I'm not saying that we're going to solve all the problems, but I want to start moving this ship a small little way in terms of rural infrastructure. And one of the suggestions that I floated previously when this was presented was an increase in the amount of dust control. And the line item, I think at the time, was about between $100,000 and $120,000. Maybe I can get a clarification on that through you to the Director of Public Works. Is that about the amount? One time, yeah.
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bilesma. It's approximately, give or take, around the 90,000.
Okay.
Is the
so,
yes.
Thank you for that, because I overstated that. So thank you for the clarification. So one of the things that I had floated was an increase to that in terms of the calcium application. And a couple of the suggestions were that we take that, we take those areas of, say, grading and perhaps calcium control and put them into a little bit more loosely guarded or a loosely used fund like we do with winter control, because certain seasons shape up differently than other seasons. Sometimes all the conditions are fine and we nail it. We're there on the right day to grade, and we get a nice gentle rain, and nobody drives on it for 2 days, and nobody mucks it up with some off-roading antics on the road, and then we were able to get our dust collection on, our dust application on, and we get minimal complaints, and sometimes it works, and we do it for the budget. But then sometimes it just doesn't work, the way that the season shapes up and other factors. And so I'm wondering if we can increase the dust control application, and I'm not necessarily looking for every dead-end road have a calcium application a second time, but I'm thinking some of those well-traveled roads, some of those connecting roads, and I think of ones in my area, Vaughan Road and 4th Concession, that we get regular complaints that we have the opportunity to get a calcium application put on there, perhaps in the middle of the summer or several weeks after the first application, and maybe have that also added to the budget. So I think it's a small step, just a small step towards dealing with what I see or perceive or feel is one of the areas consistently in this term of concern from the citizens. So that at this time, that's all I want to put forward. I'll mull things over and see where the discussion goes, and then we'll, yeah.
Don, do you want to do your presentation?
Oh. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Donna.
Thank you, Chairman Bell. Before I begin the PowerPoint presentation, I just want to acknowledge that this budget that you see in front of you is a team project. All the directors and their appropriate staff have worked for months on assisting in compiling all these figures, on working on capital budget. So it really is a team effort. And for my team, I want to acknowledge John Levins. He's not here this evening, but the tremendous amount of work he did towards ensuring this budget could be completed. And also I want to recognize Jean Friesen, who assisted in putting together this budget binder. So I just want to go over again the different dates that we had regarding this budget. As I mentioned, staff started this process back in the fall of 2017. We had our first presentation of the first draft figures February 20th. On February 22nd, we had held a budget open house. It was attended by 5 members of the public, and there were also some councillors in attendance. Tonight we have our final look at the figures for the 2018 budget. And tomorrow, if needed, we'll have a second meeting in the evening. And once the budget is approved, we'll be presenting to council monthly updates where you can see actual expenditures compared to the budget. Just to remind everyone that when they receive a tax bill from the Township of West Lincoln, we're collecting taxes for 3 different entities. We collect for ourselves, the Niagara region, and for the 4 school boards. The township portion of the tax bill is about 31%, and that percentage has stayed quite consistent over the years. So for 2018, we're going to start with our levy requirement. So the general levy requirement is the amount of funds we need to collect through property taxes in order to meet all the commitments that are in the 2018 budget. So for 2018, the general levy requirement is $6,259,300. That represents a 6.16% increase, or $363,300 over what we levied in 2017. What we do after that is we factor in assessment growth. So assessment growth is new assessment that we have in the municipality. It's nothing to do with the reassessment that MPAC does, where it's prorated over 4 years. These are new homes, new buildings that did not exist in the prior year. They're on the roll now. So the impact of assessment growth is that there's more properties bearing the cost of the levy. And what happens is we're able to increase the levy by a certain amount of funds without impacting the amount of taxes paid. So in 2018, that amount of assessment growth is $222,000. When you factor in that, the net levy requirement reduces to 2.4%. When you look at the actual impact to an average residential property, you're looking at a 2.3% increase. So yes, our levy has increased substantially. Fortunately, we have assessment growth that helps bring the actual tax rate down. Also, the average assessment in 2018 is $345,042, and in 2017 it was $326,794, and that's for a single detached residential home. Now, this slide tries to estimate what the total tax bill will look like. The region tax rates have not been formalized yet. This is assuming a 3% increase to the regional rates. Also, if any tax ratios change, this would also impact the amount that would be paid on a residential tax bill. The education rates have been set, so those you can take as they are. Also included in this slide is the streetlight levy and the sidewalk levy. So that's specific taxes that are levied in the urban service area, which is urban West Lincoln, which is Smithville. And that total levy is increasing $5. There's a decrease on the street lights, but there's an increase on the sidewalks. So if you're in the rural area, the West Lincoln taxes are increasing $26.13. If you're in the urban area, you're looking at $30.72. So when council received their budget binder, attached to it was a memo that gave detailed departmental explanations as to why things changed or what was included in those budgets. This evening, I'm going to just provide a higher level of what was impacting this budget. So overall, departmental operating expenditures are $7,797,300. This represents a 4.14% increase over the 2017 operating expenditures. So what's contributing to this increased cost? First, I start with labor costs and benefits. They comprise 69% of this total budget. In 2018, total salary and benefit costs are $5.4 million, compared to 2017, where they were just almost $5.1 million. So they've increased $335,700, which is a 6.6% increase over 2017. What's pushing that increase? We have an extra full-time equivalent or an extra staff person in the planning department. It was approved in 2017. However, it was not in the 2017 budget, so you're seeing that increase in the 2018 budget. We have Bill 148 legislation, which we must comply to. Just to remind council, some of the implications of that are an increase to the minimum wage, a change in how statutory holiday pay is calculated, a change as to how much vacation pay is given to part-time staff. So that's impacted our budget $40,000. We've also had increases for pay equity to the library staff, which has increased the budget $43,000. And finally, $176,000, which represents a 3.5 increase, is to take into account salary costs and also benefit costs to the township. Other items contributing to the higher expenditure. This is the second year of the MERS allocation, which is increasing this budget by $298,000. We've also increased our transfer to reserve significantly, $237,000 increase, and that has gone to the fire, the road equipment, and the bridges reserve. And we've also increased our funding from the operating fund for special projects. It's $118,750,000 increase. So as Mr. Murray expressed, well, where's the revenue to help offset these expenditures? Our payments in lieu revenue has increased by $319,000. Our OMPF funding, which is the funding we receive from the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, has increased by $82,400. We have an increase in planning department revenues of $187,000. And we also have a new revenue line under transportation services of $88,000, and that represents the road use agreement. That's the license for using the road allowances. When we net all these together, we end up with the original increase to the levy. So this is a very high level as to why we're increasing the levy by the amount we are. So as we has been in the recommendation, there are 3 service level requests that have been made. Council saw these in February's meeting as well. The one change that has been made is the addition of the 2 truck drivers. You're going to notice the first column shows the annualized amount for 2 truck drivers of $164,000. The second one is the impact to the operating fund in 2018, because that's assuming a May hiring. So we're spreading out that cost. There's a cost in 2018, but there'll also be a cost in 2019 that'll represent the cost from January to April. The way to read this chart is for each service level request, I've indicated what the addition to taxes are. So for the addition of the 2 truck drivers, you would be adding $20.29 to the $26 previously presented. And if council were to approve all 3, you're looking at a $28.78 addition, which works out to 4.84% increase. Now, this slide is just an information slide, just to represent how do West Lincoln taxes compare to some of our neighboring municipalities. These are the 2017 taxes paid for a home assessed at $326,794,000. So West Lincoln is the lowest, and I do want to just point out that Wainfleet is on this list because I've used them in other analysis. However, their average assessment is much lower than ours. It's $262,000, whereas the other municipalities used in this comparison, their average assessments are actually higher than ours. So it's a fair comparison, but I don't want you to wonder why I didn't put Wainfleet on, because they're on other charts. But that's just a brief explanation there. So in the open house that we had, there was quite a discussion about roads and, you know, how many kilometers of roads West Lincoln actually has to maintain. So this chart here shows you the amount of taxes collected in 2017, the amount of households, the kilometer of roads, the taxes per kilometer of road, and the households per kilometer of road. All this information is gathered from the financial information returns, which are available on the provincial website. So I don't think it's any surprise that, you know, West Lincoln does have the most lane kilometer of roads to maintain. This chart is very similar. It looks at bridges and culverts, because bridges and culverts is a major component of our 10-year capital plan as well. Again, other than Lincoln, West Lincoln has the most bridges and culverts, and the lowest amount of taxes going towards those. So water and wastewater, as indicated previously, water and wastewater is paid through user fees. In 2016, we had a financial plan conducted that looked at what rates do we need to set in order to ensure a water and wastewater department that was sustainable. So again, a recommendation of a 5% increase is being made for 2018. The total operating budgets for these two departments total just over $3 million, and included in that is a transfer to reserves of just over $400,000. This chart indicates the impact to an average water user in town. So for the average user, there's going to be a $12 increase to their quarterly bill. These rates, since they're effective July 1st, 2018, it'll impact their September and their December bills. Turning to capital and special projects, we have a total budgeted capital of just over $4 million, and special projects totaling $511,500 for a total of $4,568,800. And this chart just shows you how these projects are being funded. And the bulk of it is through our reserves. 63% is being funded through reserves. Now we're taking that same capital budget and we're breaking it down by service area, so you can see transportation, fire, culture and rec, environmental, corporate management, planning, library, and building inspection. So this shot just takes that information from the previous screen, and it just highlights that 50% of the capital budget is being spent on transportation services. So this is just to highlight some of the major projects within each service area. So transportation services, a total of $2.3 million. Surface treatment of roads, $940,000. There's a bridge replacement for $360,000. That's a bridge that is shared with Wainfleet. So that represents our township's portion of that bridge. So the actual cost is double that. We need to replace some equipment, and there's also some sidewalk work being done on Wade Road, and a traffic master plan needs to be completed. Fire services, there's the base and truck radio replacement and pumper rescue station number 2 replacement. Recreation and culture, this includes parks and recreational facilities. There's a request for Smithville Square Parkette, that's in the urban area of Smithville. by it's the CIBC parking lot to do some beautification there. The Abingdon baseball diamond lights need replacement. Wellandport Hall, some improvements there. New playground equipment at Streamside Park, and a replacement of some equipment. Environmental services, which incorporates water, wastewater, and storm. Just for council's information, rural storm in the past was budgeted under road maintenance, and that the major cost there is the ditching in the rural areas. That's now been brought under a new service level called storm sewer, because that's actually what it represents. So we have urban storm sewer and rural storm sewer. Corporate management, some of the major projects in this service area is a replacement of the phone system, replacement of the email server, and repairs and maintenance at Town Hall and also to the parking lot. Under planning services, we have urban boundary expansion studies that need to be completed, railway crossing justification study, a streetscape master plan for Wellandport, and a bike trail master plan. And finally, library, we have furniture and equipment for the Wellandport addition, and addition to collections of $39,800. Oh, this is the final one. It's a building. They have a request for a new vehicle. So just to point out two items that are in the report regarding reserves. The first is the capital reserve, which I want to point out that is under pressure if you look at the 10-year capital plan. And this is just restating what we know. When council saw the asset management plan in January, it also indicated that, you know, our assets replacement was under pressure. And not to make any excuses, but most municipalities are facing the same dilemma. So there's decisions that will have to be made. There may be a requirement to incur debt to complete some of these projects or deferral of projects. But definitely there is pressure on our capital 10-year plan. So in order to help that capital reserve, we're proposing that part of the road settlement reserve fund, what's available, what's left, that part of it be used to help fund these 3 road projects. So we would like to replace that capital reserve draw of $598,000 with the draw from the road settlement reserve fund instead. Now coming to fire, when we look at the 10-year capital plan for fire as was presented last month to council and is still in our 10-year capital plan, it's putting a lot of pressure on the fire reserve. It'll be in negative balances for quite a few years, and some of those years it's a significant negative balance. So 2 things are being recommended. It's being recognized that the fire reserve will have to be increased annually, so the transfer to the fire reserve. We're recommending, you know, a 7% increase annually to that to keep up with the needs in that area. And we're also recommending a deferral of some of the projects. Councillor Ganan at the last meeting requested that perhaps we can push everything back 1 year. And in some cases, I've actually pushed things back more than 1 year. And that was all done to maximize the cash flows that we have and to try to keep the fire reserve in a positive light as much as we could. So that's it for the presentation.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Canan. We got to resume where we left off.
I was on hold from the last.
Yeah.
That's a long hold. That was a very long hold, but thank you for that presentation. I think you very clearly laid things out. Although I've been given credit or blame for pushing back the fire budget by a year, it was actually Councillor Bell that needs to share that credit because he was very concerned about the negative reserves and made comment about that on several occasions as well. So I think we all share that a little bit. I have a little bit to say about roads as well, and I guess this is as good a time as any. Many of you know already that I've been on vacation for the last couple of years, and years, yeah, just about feels like that. The last couple of weeks, this week has felt like a year. But in any case, when I came back to the article in the paper that some of you perhaps saw. West Lincoln looks at increasing road repair investment, and so I didn't know of that while I was away, but I've looked at that really carefully this week. And so I have some comments that I'd like to sort of read into the record at this point in time. I read in the newspaper upon returning from my vacation, which was not 2 years, an article based on the meeting of February 20th, where the initial 2018 budget report was presented to Council. It was a very fairly written report by Scott Ross, and I was pleased that Mr. Ross had included factual information provided by our Director of Public Works and Engineering. I recall from that meeting, which was the night just before we went on vacation, that Councillor Bylsma made the suggestion that an additional application of dust control might be something that rural residents would appreciate. Mr. Julian indicated the cost of one application on the necessary roads would be approximately $95,000 to $98,000. I think that number is sort of in the ballpark. It's all been tossed around a few times. The request for additional dust control seemed to me at the time to be a somewhat reasonable request. But as our Director of Finance has pointed out to this Council many times, both in writing and verbally, since our overall budget is quite small by most municipal standards, every $59,000 added is an additional 1% on the tax levy, making that item, one extra application of dust control alone, add close to an additional 2% increase on each residence in the municipality. So I thought that, Councillor Bylsma, your suggestion tonight about leveling it out was probably more appropriate. I still like the idea, but I don't like the extra 2%. So, taking the information in the article a step further, Councillor Rayner suggested that we should start to tar and chip our gravel roads, suggesting that it would, in the long term, save money on the cost of grading, dust control, and gravel applications. And I think Mr. Cosby alluded to that tonight as well. This, too, seemed on the surface to be a solution to the problem of 133 kilometers of gravel roads that we must deal with in West Lincoln. So I did some calculations on that situation using a what-if scenario. What if, as a municipality, we were to decide to start with only 10 kilometers of gravel roads and bring them up to a tar and chip standard road? After speaking with Mr. Julian, our Director of Public Works, to seek approximate costs, I decided to look into this more fully. So with no particular road in mind, without knowing the exact number of cross culverts that would be needed, nor the number of driveway culverts that would be necessary, nor the amount of ditching that would be necessary, and not including the necessary engineering work that would be needed to do such a job in 2018, at the estimated cost of approximately $130 per meter plus HST, it would cost approximately $1,300,000 to do those 10 kilometers of roads. With the engineering costs of approximately $40 per meter included, another $400,000 would need to be added to that cost. Dividing this total approximate cost using the information from our Director of Finance that every additional $59,000 equals a 1% increase to the tax levy indicates that turning a 10-kilometer stretch of gravel road into tar and chip would create an additional 28.8% increase to the levy in West Lincoln. It's also prudent at this time to point out to all West Lincoln residents that at the Budget Public Open House on February 22nd, and I know this has come up tonight, but I'm going to say it again, when a citizen expressed his opinion that nothing was being done in and for the rural areas, it was clearly pointed out by our Director of Public Works that when looking at the capital and special projects budget, 50% of that total, and at that time it was $4,607,300, it's been adjusted slightly downward now, when it's allocated, that 50% of that is allocated to transportation. And of that 50%, which is approximately $2,300,000, 85% of that is spent in the rural areas of the township. Arguably, the question is, are we spending enough on our roads budget? The short answer is, probably not. However, that begs the further question of just what percentage tax increase can and should be borne by all residents so as to tar and chip gravel roads in the future. I don't pretend to have an answer for that. It would take a great deal of hard work by many to find an appropriate answer. However, at this time, a further increase of close to 29% for a surmised or what-if stretch of a 10-kilometer road out of our 133 kilometers clearly indicates that the suggestion to begin to tar and chip our gravel roads is not a feasible solution. I think that we need to be looking at these things, but I think the idea for residents to look at an article like this and think, you know, yeah, that's a really good idea is exactly what I thought when I read it. I thought, yeah, that's a good idea, until you start to look at what the actual cost of that would be. And I think, unfortunately, West Lincoln's not in a position at this point to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Zinn, you still got the floor.
I'm fine for now, thank you. I have some other questions, but I wanted to get that comment out right away. Thank you.
Councillor Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Further to that, what Councillor Ganane said, I was also looking at the fact that it would save all the gravel that would be hauled out there. I don't know if that was mentioned. The amount of trucks that are necessary to do the job, the labor of the men that are going out there to do it, a $300,000 grader that eventually, if we get them done, the gravel roads, the tarred and chip, we don't have to do them anymore. And the dust control is eliminated. There are other factors that I think need to be weighed into it that would help to make the difference. The other thing I wanted to say is, and I won't belate this any more than tonight, and I'm done with the subject, but I've always felt strongly that when you're elected to represent the best interests of the residents and the taxpayers. And that means you're accountable for that to them. So when we had a situation, and this wasn't this council, and it wasn't last council, it was council before, where they decided they were going to donate a substantial amount of money to the YMCA.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
No, just I like to finish, and I'd like to say.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Well, it's point of order because.
When you say councillors is not accountable, and then you bring up a situation that we voted on 4 years ago, you're tainting all councillors, and you're saying that we're not accountable.
4 years ago?
214.
No.
214 is when we decided to pay it. 210 is when it was built. 209 is when we voted on it. I am not in favor. It doesn't matter the year, councillor. I'm not in favor, Mr. Chair, of the councillor saying that we're not accountable when he brings up the YMCA.
Okay.
Thank you.
Point made. Councillor Rayner, the YMCA has been discussed many a times at this council. It was voted on earlier in this term. We accepted it as a council, and we've moved on from it, and we are making our payments.
Well, I
so if
understand.
you have something new.
Okay, the only point that I wanted
That's
to
not
make
new.
was in relation to Councillor Ganane, who said that we can't afford to do the roads. And we had Mrs. Pickfance here tonight many times saying, please do my road. Hers is 3 kilometers at 140,000 a kilometer is 420, which is the exact amount of the YMCA. It would have been nice if you used the money to do the
Councillor
road.
Rayner?
That's it. That's
okay.
all I got to say.
You're out of order. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments? Councillor Trombetta?
Just to clarify, it's not $400,000. That's just the total cost for just tarring and chipping of the road surface treatment. There's still the structure of building up the road, culverts, and everything else. There's also an additional cost, which we have to get the accurate numbers out there to the public.
Yep.
To say $400,000, it's not the accurate number.
No.
You still have to build up the road with gravel. You still have to fix the culverts. You have to give the proper total to be transparent to the residents of the township of West Lincoln.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hang on, she's got a further to a point.
Just to that point,
No.
some members of the community have come, and I want to make sure that the number is correct, because the idea of tar and chipping the road exists today in building houses, one thing, and whatever the cost is. But to have a road that has got the shoulders sufficiently large to be able to allow for bike lanes or motorized personal vehicles or whatever we want to talk about is not the same number. So, I mean, like, let's figure out what it's going to cost us. It's a lot of money, but let's not kid each other. And I turn that over, but I just want to make sure that we're saying the right numbers.
Yep, okay. Councillor Rayner for a second time.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I believe that the information that I got from Public Works, and correct me, Mr. Julian, if I'm incorrect, was I believe the estimated cost was $140,000 a kilometer to do a road. Through you to Mr. Julian, is that not correct, or am I wrong?
Just point of clarification, Mr. Chair. Mr. Julian just sent out an email this week to all members of council stating the total cost.
Who's going to answer that?
Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Rayner, and thank you, Councillor Trombetta. I was going to refer to that. So the email that did go out there, I guess last week, referred to a cost of $170 a meter. Some of that was based on our estimates, and some of it was based on the current tenders that we have.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Bilsma, second time.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Chief.
We understand these pressures. I think the community understands the tension that we have. And my point previously was just where the complaints, where the concerns from the community are arising, and so I think the discussion that we're having here is centered in the right direction. But just to Councillor Rayner's point, and to balance again what other councillors have raised, we know the cost of tar and chipping, but one of the costs that we do not have, and maybe Councillor or Director of Public Works can help us with that number, is what is the annual cost of maintaining the 133 roads calculated backwards per meter as well. So there is, dust control applications, there is grading, there is gravel that's added, and then there's a labor. And so there's a cost associated with maintaining the 133 kilometers of roads. And we know that cost, or we can at least extrapolate from 2017 what that cost is and apply it again this year. So that would also probably give us a second half of that. So I don't know if the Director of Public Works has that number calculated down to a meter or kilometer, or we can do the math.
I don't believe it does.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bilesma, I've tried to do, I don't have all that information in front of me, but I've done a very quick, I do have last year's proposed budget in front of me, and I know what our operations manager spent in gravel last year, and that would be for all of the gravel roads, obviously, that was $100,000, and our budget for the haulage of that was about $38,000. Our dust control, as I said, was about $90,000, so that's $228,000 total. If you divided that by 133,000, you'd, and the Director of Finance may have better information than I have. That's just quick.
Three. So it's timely that we've revamped our chart of accounts, because now we actually have paved roads and unpaved roads. So we do have a budget for the maintenance of unpaved roads. So I don't know if you want to, I'll just refer to the page in the binder. It's probably easier.
The BS binder.
I can't read it. Okay, so we have, it's on page 42 of the binder. So we have 153,000, and that represents the gravel resurfacing material. So that's what we're budgeting for gravel. Then if you go down to the contract, so roads and maintenance contract, 135,700. That's broken down by dust control, 96,500, and gravel resurfacing contract. That must be the truck drivers that come and lay it. Yeah, that's 38,700. So that is our budget. That used to be budgeted under roads maintenance. So now we've broken it out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments at this time? Councillor Chichuk?
First, I think it would be appropriate to move forward, Mr. Chair, without saying to our staff, thank you for the work, the comprehensive work, the complicated work, the hard work that has been put together to try and get us to a new financial package, and which perhaps looks like it's moved numbers around, but in fact, it makes it for a much easier way to read this year and into the future our budget. And it's already obviously there because some of our some speakers this evening have spoken to what they've seen in the information that's been supplied. I need to say that having worked through hundreds of municipal budgets in my career, this is one of the most transparent budgets I've looked at, and there's nothing hidden, and there are no anomalies. And I think a little earlier in the budget process, there was concerns by members of this council as well as members of the public about the fact that there was mistruths or perhaps confusion, I'm going to say, about what was in here. But having taken the time to go through this with the director and taken the time to go through it myself, I have to say that we'll probably win one of those professional awards on this budget, but that's about the presentation. That's not about the quality of the numbers. And I've taken a long time to say thank you to all of the staff for the input that you've put into this budget, to the work you've put into it, because it isn't easy. And it is not going to be easy as we move forward into the future. That's obvious. Whether it's that we increase operational costs or we put it to a reserve and then take it out to spend on the money that spend on the projects that we're going to do. I've heard a dichotomy of things this evening and other nights, and that is, what's the right service level for us? Where do we want to be? We want low taxes, or do we want a better service level? Do we want a substantially increased service level? You've seen in the numbers that, pardon me, Mrs. DeFilippos has put to us, is that if you are small, and smaller than us is Wainfleet, my heavens, their taxes are substantially higher. If we go big, that's not where we want to be, because you can see that those taxes take us higher. So we need to find the proper mix of services, service levels, and the cost of those services. And it doesn't surprise me that we are 69% for the cost of human resources to deliver the services we have, because that's really what municipal services are about. It's about the people who deliver the service, and we are the front door to what it is governments have. We are the front door, and oftentimes we ring the bell at the province or other levels of government to come up with something, to get partnerships or whatever. So at this point in time, Mr. Chair, it sounds like I have nothing to say about the numbers. I wish I could find the magic bullet in these numbers. I wish I could say that it's not right that we take the money from somewhere and that we put it somewhere else. But I know that what we've done here is we've thought as a council and as a complete community to try and get something done for everyone. So I'm happy to listen to the rest of my colleagues, happy to hear what it is that's happened, but I sure do hope that there is no criticism or any disparaging remarks about the quality of the workmanship, quality of the numbers that are in there. And the unfortunate fact is that taxes are to be affected in an upward direction, but modestly as compared to many other communities. We started at 7.8, by the way, and our treasurer took us down to 2+. And if we want to change service levels, and only if we want to change service levels, we'll take that back up under 5. Other communities are trying to get down to 10, from 10 to get to the existing service level. So I only say that because all municipalities are fighting, fighting with their numbers, fighting to try and get a balanced budget, trying to get to a budget that reflects what they want for the community. And I say that I think good work has been done, and I will listen now to my colleagues as they make their comments.
Councillor Tribetta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with what Councillor Chichuk said. The staff did work very hard on this budget to come up with the numbers they did, and a lot of neighboring communities are struggling, and I wouldn't want to be in their position at the moment. I like this budget. I think Donna and staff did a great job, and she was really clear and outlined everything that I needed to ask in this budget, so I felt it was really good. I like the request to add the 2 truck drivers. You know, we have 8 truck drivers. One gets sick or someone is on a holiday. You know, we're down to 6, and we get a snowstorm like we did unexpectedly. It puts the service down for the community. And I know that transpired this early spring, I guess, for that last snowstorm that we had. That, you know, one was on scheduled vacation and one gentleman got sick, and you know, which the staff did a good job. But you know, again, some of the roads weren't as cleaned as in a timely fashion due to that. So I think 2 extra drivers would help this community really well. The other question I have here through you, Mr. Chair, is, Brian, you're still with us, right? You're still here today? just to ask you a question. I want to know about the CIP. I'm wondering if we need to do that CIP this year. Is it a necessity to do it? Can you give me some background on that CIP? Like, do we have to do it this year? Does it need to be done? Like,
through you, Mr. Chair. Is that on? Yeah, that's on. The CIP is a program that Council put in place in around 2009, 2010, somewhere there, to provide opportunities for financial assistance. And so far we've only used the program with respect to facade improvements. The reason for suggesting the increase in additional money on a going forward basis, not just a one-time shot, to be honest, is that in our policy to try and intensify our community, we probably are going to have to come up with opportunities to assist in the redevelopment of infill or intensification lots in town. I don't want to specifically name any individual properties, but there are properties in this town, and I'm sure you can all think of them, where we have known contamination, and those properties are going to have to get redeveloped as we try to achieve a complete community and build out inside the existing urban boundaries. So whether the money goes in this year or not, I guess is a call that this council needs to make. But my advice is that we need to start investing and putting some money aside to provide opportunities for redevelopment. I give the example of brownfield cleanup, but there are a number of different program opportunities that are in both the downtown CIP and the brownfield CIP, and other communities, and Welland is a good example, put millions of dollars into this account to assist with redevelopment opportunities. I'm not saying that we're comparable to Welland, but it is a big issue. It got reared at regional council around the whole discussion on development charges. And so I guess my advice to council is that we need to start investing in properties in our community to help get those properties redeveloped. Hence the reason for the suggestion. But it's really council's call as to whether you do it this year, but it's really going to be ongoing. It's going to have to be an ongoing opportunity.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, like my suggestion, what if we were to put, I don't know, I'm just going to throw a number, $10,000. You know, how much would that bring that percentage from 2.96, Donna?
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. Sorry, I'm not quick with numbers to get a percentage.
No. So you want to change the 40?
Well, just to kind
10?
of trying to say with Brian, if we have to start doing something, what if we start at that, instead of 40, we start with 10 this year?
Mm-hmm. I just have to. Okay, so that increase right now, we're saying it's a $7.42 increase. You would reduce that down, it would only be, if it's $10,000, it would be a $1.85 increase.
Okay. And that, it brings that number 4.84 to
1 second.
4.2?
$4.3.
4.3. I like that. So I see that we're still putting, like Director of Planning said, like, we still have to look at that and put money aside for it. But I see if we can put $10,000 aside this year and then move forward. I'd like to see that number change to 10,000 at the appropriate time. If I have to put a recommendation through, I would, but I'd like to hear what other members of committee say around here, on the table about that money. Maybe it's a little cost savings there that we could look at. Just a suggestion, but I'm quite sure my colleagues would like to reiterate something. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. At the appropriate time, I'll continue on.
Councillor Chichak and then Councillor Bozeman.
I fully understand, and I like the idea of finding the money to do some savings. I guess I have a problem with my concern, and Mr. Treble will probably smile at that, and that is that I have a great passion to try and balance the upgrade and the enhanced view of our downtown core, of our existing community. So the community improvement funding, I think that if, as we grow, the focus is on those the donut around the hole, which is our downtown, if we don't keep in time with it and offer assistance to those structures that need to have facade improvement or a streetscaping improvement or a softening of the edges that will help us through the next several years, that we're going to end up with a new community looking at a somewhat derelict downtown. So in order to, if we're going to help the Chamber of Commerce, if we're going to help the existing businesses, we really do need to be there. And so if we're going to save about 0.5%, I'd rather see us spend it and see that we are continuing to improve and bring people downtown. So that's my comment. Although I do commend you for the suggestion, Councillor Trombetta, I would just, I think we'd be doing a disservice to our historic downtown if we did.
Thank you. Councillor Bozeman.
Thank you. So my question is to Director of Planning. Is that the $40,000 that Councillor Trombetta is raising, is that a complete number? Is that the whole story? Because my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is part of a funding formula that we share with a region and a province, and it's kind of our portion of the Smithville Parkette, so it might not be as simple as just reducing the number down, because by doing so we share a smaller number with other levels of government, and then that would kind of jeopardize the fund. Like it's part of a funding formula. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's a couple of things I think you've got mixed together in there.
Okay.
The Parkette is a different budget line.
Okay.
It's not part of this budget line. The CIP, there's two areas that are part of the CIP. The entire urban area of Smithville is part of the CIP when it comes to brownfield discussions. Downtown discussions, as Councillor Chichak has referred to, are really the area from the high school at the corner right here through to the railway tracks and the train station at the north end. And the area in there is an opportunity for redevelopment, be it facade improvements or assistance with building construction or cleanup and those kind of things. In addition, there is existing money in the pot. And I think the Director of Finance indicated the number in the supplemental materials to the report. And there is a commitment that we've already made to about 15,000 going to some facade improvements. So I think, according to the report, there's about 69,000 balance, almost 70,000 balance in the account, of which we've got a commitment for about 15,000. And then the proposal is to start building that up, because it's not going to be enough if we have a number of different development projects come online that need some financial assistance to sort of kickstart them, as other communities are now doing in the area.
Okay, thank you for the clarity. Yeah. No.
Councillor Trombetta.
So just to get some clarification here, there's nothing imminent at the moment that needs, like you're saying, the brownfields, but there's nothing imminent at the moment that needs to be, well, I shouldn't say to be done, but like pending at the moment, right, Mr. Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do not have any specific proposals that have come forward as official requests as of right now. I do know of about 3 different properties, though, in our downtown core where there are development plans in the works. Whether it's this year or next year, there could be some proposals coming forward that could start asking for assistance and having these kind of discussions with council. Nothing specific, but there are things on the horizon.
Okay, so if it does get pushed till next year and you raise that next year to back up to 40, but again, it's all the intention of if the council decides to do that or not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Joyner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a very good discussion, and the discussion is, you know, do we drop it from 40 down to 10,000 to save a half a point? And you've heard different decisions around the table. I look at it very much differently. And the Director of Planning is right. We don't know when the stakeholders are going to come forward. It could be this year, it could be next year, it could be 2020. The key is, though, is to be ready. Because if we put away $40,000 now, the amount of return on investment is far more superior than $40,000. Or even if you take 40 and add it to 55, you're just under 100,000. It's still not a lot of money to help these people, these business owners, these owners of this property clean up their property in order to turn it into something that's very viable in our downtown core. And you really just have to think for a sec as you drive from west to east into our downtown, and you can name those properties. So for a mere 40,000 or half a point, the amount in return that we're going to give back is truly insurmountable, in my opinion. So for that reason, I would like to see the $40,000 stay in the budget for CIP. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions, comments at this time? Okay. I have a couple. Okay. That's my turn. So I heard a whole lot tonight. First of all and foremost, I'd like to just again thank the staff from the Treasury Department right through. Okay, they've all done a great job. Everybody's worked really hard. Talked to them all numerous times. When this budget first came out in the first form of a draft, we all went through it. We had the open house, heard some comments, went home, went through the book many more times, talked to staff many more times. A lot of adjustments have been made to this budget. I believe we have a great budget. Staff was asked on a few things that I need you to help me help you get what we need for this community. And they did. They come back with some great recommendations on how we can do things moving forward. And at the end of the day, we have a good number for our budget. One of the things that come out of the open house, and I brought it forward at the original budget, was the 2 truck drivers, because I wanted to challenge staff. And they meant that challenge, and they found a way to get us 2 truck drivers. So for that, I'm in favor of the 2 truck drivers, hands down. We need that service. The bylaw officer, the same thing. He's not just a bylaw officer. I mean, people hear that, it's like, great, you guys are going to be tagging me all the time now. When need be, yes, he'll be doing that, but he's going to be working with the building department also. So that person, yes, thank you, Officer Joe. So again, I'm in favor of that. we just had the discussion about the CIP, and that was some of my things I wanted to talk about, and I do have the answers now, and it seems clear that we need to keep it in there, Councilor Trevetta. I know what's being said. And as was said by our director, we did just approve 5 projects just recently in council to help with the downtown. There's no sense having the fund if we don't have any funds in it to help the people. And some of the properties are definitely brownfield, and the one that's potentially could be coming forward is a definite brownfield situation. So, as Mayor Joyner pointed out, 100,000 don't go very far cleaning up a brownfield. That's for sure. You get a couple of truckloads, but so overall, I'm in favor of this budget moving forward. Each and every department has done their share to get us to where we are at this point in time. So again, thanks very much to the staff, all the directors, and to the treasurer for everything she's done. So, and that's all I have to say. So if there's no other questions, Councilor Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Ms. DePolifis. Under the background, you mentioned the tax levy from the MERS. 283,500 in 2017, 298,000 this year, and 307,000 next year. Is that in reference to the 5.1 and 5.0 that was on the report from 2016?
Through you, Chairman Bell, yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you. That sets the stage for basically the concern that I have. To me, this budget is probably the nicest, easiest, smoothest reading one that I think we've ever had. And the only part about it that's, to me, causing the problem is it's the operating and capital. And to me, the tax is made up, when we do the property taxes and stuff, it's made up of the assessment value, which in a report that was done last year, there was a delay in getting our budget numbers in because we were doing it in December, and then MPAC had not provided the numbers yet. And when they had provided the numbers, we were figuring it was about 5.25, and in reality, when you looked at the assessment, which in 2016 was 309,532 and 2017 was 326,794, it actually was 5.6% increase. So part of the tax bill, and it says it clearly a number of times, that the property assessment value is important in the calculations. It's a number of times it says it in this report. That's going to go up 5.6% on average. I know mine has gone up over 10. So, I mean, that is a big impact on the property taxes. It's got nothing to do with the township. It's MPAC's doing. We can't control that. But the MERS is part of the cost, as is the operating and capital. And the 5.1 on the MERS last year and the 3.5 from the operating and capital made it 8.6. And there was, and I'm sure if you looked at your tax bill from 2016, 2017, there was a significant increase. Mine was a little less than 8%, 7.8. But if you look at this year, for example, this year we've got 2 applications of the MERS. We got the 5.1 from last year and the 5.1 from this year. And they go into the base, which means it's a compound tax. So the 5.1 from last year gets taxed from the 5.1 from this year, which is 0.26. So it becomes 5.36 plus the 5.1 this year, plus whatever the operating and capital is. And it could be 4.84. And if that's the case, then the total this year comes up to 15.3. Now, Mr. Chair,
Councilor Rayner, is there a question in this? We all
I'm
know.
making a statement
We all know about the MERS.
I
We
know.
voted on it. It's being built.
I know, I'm just trying.
We had last year at council, is there a question?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, that's this year. Next year, when you add the last installment, it's actually 20.83. But
Councilor Rayner, your question, please. We know what that is.
Well, sometimes you don't have to have a question, Mr. Chair. You can make a statement. We're allowed to do both.
Well,
and all I'm doing is making a
all you're
statement
doing is
right
rejuvenating
now.
stuff we know about.
Pardon me?
We're aware of what happened. We were here. We voted
Well, we're
on
aware
it.
of a lot of things that people repeat around the table, but I still have the right to say it regardless. That's the privilege of being elected here,
So
is
long
to
as you get to
represent
the
my people
point.
and make a statement. All I'm doing is
So
making a
long.
statement. It's factual, it's accurate.
Get to the
I'm
point.
not trying to hide anything.
Get to the point.
Okay, the point is that we've got a dual problem here. We've got a tax increase that's actually quite large, and people will see it when they get their tax bill. However, we still have an operating and capital that needs to be approved in order for this corporation to continue to move forward. I have no problem with the operating capital portion of this budget. I think it was done fantastic. I think the report was excellent, and the Director of Finance should be commended for it. However, we can't take away from the fact that there is the MERS part that's added, and it will be reflected on your tax bill, and when you see it, you will know where it come from. So that's basically what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. Councilor Tribetta, then Councilor Chichak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Director of Finance. The MERS that Councilor Rayner is describing was all set out, financed, and described in the 2017 operating budget. Is that correct?
Through you, Chairman Bell, when we presented the 2017 budget, which was in December 2016, we informed council the three levy increases that would be required in order to complete the MERS facility. We indicated an increase in 2017, 2018, and 2019, and that was laid out in the budget report for 2017.
So
yes.
once the budget was approved, there was, well, obviously it was a go once the 2017 budget was approved, which obviously is the payment for the MERS, like Councilor Rayner has said, and so on and so forth, correct? According to report RFDT 3316. Is that correct?
Yes, in the budget report, we laid out the MERS financing. I don't want anyone to think that was the actual MERS approval, because the MERS approval is when you approve the actual tender.
But the financing was approved at budget time for the MERS, correct?
Yeah, we outlined it, yes.
So where I'm confused is, and sorry, Councilor Rayner, we have a recorded vote of 6-1 approving the finance for the 2017 budget, which includes the financing for the MERS. We have one councillor that did not support it, but we have 6 councillors that supported the financing for the MERS. So what you're stating is stuff that was approved by yourself on the 2017 budget. So all that, so you did approve that on the 2017 budget, is what I'm saying. So you knew about these numbers coming forward. You're just, because you did approve the numbers coming forward and the 2017 budget. Because we have a recorded vote and you approved that budget. So I've just come kind of confused. So you're just, you are aware and that you knew the cost implications at that time. Thank you.
There?
Yeah, thank you. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Chichak, and then you, Mike.
You know, I said this was good work, it was comprehensive work, it was complicated work. And through you, Mr. Chair, to our treasurer, when we said it was a 5.1% tax increase, it does get compounded. So if I had a $100 tax bill, and we put 5.1% on it, it'd be 105, and then it would, the next year, that next 5.1 would make it 110.25, if my math is correct. But the issue that I have to remember is twofold, if I'm not wrong, and I'll let you say yes or no in a minute. One, new assessment in the township would take that 5.1 and change it. So I might only get 4.9 if new assessment came on, because the amount might we may not need as much as 5.1. We'd be able to use, in the long run, in year 3, we might not need a full 5.0 the final year. If 5.1 was the first year, and we based it on a very conservative growth and assessment, in total, we may find that it's not 5.1, 5.1, and 5. Am I correct?
Through you, Councillor Bell.
Go ahead.
To answer your first question, yes, it's cumulative.
Right?
Second, when we talk about the 5 and 5.1 and 5.1, that is the increase to the levy.
Right.
Those are whole dollar amounts that we have to increase the levy. However, then we take into assessment growth.
Right.
And that lowers the net levy requirement.
Thank you.
Which lowers the actual tax rate. And that is why in 2017, even though we increased the levy, the actual tax rate was not a 5% increase. We're seeing it again in 2018. We're increasing the levy 6.16%. However, because of assessment growth, it works out to a 2.3% increase in taxes.
So, Mr. Chair, I have 2 more questions, if you wouldn't
got the
mind.
floor.
Thank you. Okay. So now if we talk about new assessment and MPAC, if MPAC comes in and raises the entire assessment base in the township of West Lincoln, dollar for dollar on every property by 10%, in fact, no one gets a tax increase, right? Our assessment just goes up, and we split up the need on exactly the same basis. But that's really, really hard, theoretically. So when a new assessment comes in, mine might go up by 15%, but Councillor Trombetta's might go down by 7%, and Councillor Rayner's might go up by 10%. Is that correct?
Through you, Councillor Bell, yes.
So trying to do a year-to-year comparison and the impact on what's happening to individual properties is not just a simple arithmetic thing where I say my taxes went up $150 for MERS, because in fact I might have built a porch, I could have done other things to my house, or I might have had my assessment catch up to me, as well as new assessment in the township coming in, reducing the overall impact. Correct? So I've got an amalgam of all of those activities taking place on my tax bill.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Because I really don't want to fool the people, and I think that's where the magic, or the hidden, or the boogies, or whatever people have accused municipalities for. We're not hiding anything. All of that's in this budget. And if someone wants to hear what their impact is, then they have to go through each step of what happened to their house. But I guess that the other piece of magic is, Mr. Chair, that just as Mrs. DeFilippis has just said, the other thing is our staff have looked at the impact or how we can save and what else we should include. And with careful and prudent suggestions, working down our budget from 7.83 or wherever we started down to 2.44, and then allowing this council to make decisions on how we want to take it up is up to us now. So it's not magic. It's that our staff have said, and if you do this, OMERS is going up by 10%, your staff costs are going up by this, that's going up, but here's what we think you should do, and we'll bring that back down. So the overall impact to the taxpayer is less. And then if you guys want to change the service level, you can add this back. So I'm not trying to be simplistic, and I'm not trying to be irreverent to the staff. They've said this repeatedly, or to anyone else, but what I really want to say is, if we look at the numbers, we have to look at our own individual house and how all of these changes impact us. We're talking generalities here. So I hope to goodness that everybody that looks at this budget knows and understands why they're affected the way they are. Thank you. Again, a prudent and well-thought-out budget.
Okay, Councillor Rayner.
Mr. Chair, and further to Councillor Chichok's comments, on page 4 of the February 20th the draft operating and capital, it says an important factor in determining the impact of the tax levy to homeowners is to determine the average residential assessment. And then, like I said, in the 2017 operating budget that was early and impact was not prepared, the estimated increase per year is 5.6%. So that was across the board also. It didn't say up or down, it just said across the board. And the assessment values have increased every one of the last 3 years from, well, I had the numbers before, from 309 to 326 to 345. So they had come up. The first comment that Councillor Chichok mentioned was assessment growth. And page 3 in here of the same report says assessment growth results in a portion of the tax levy increase not impacting the taxes. But the very next page says regional taxes in West Lincoln is probably going to be higher than anticipated because the Niagara municipality assessment growth is on the high end in West Lincoln. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. DePolifis. Does this not balance that out? If all of a sudden we were thinking, and one other comment before you answer, if you don't mind. I was having lunch in Font Hill last week, and I had the Font Hill newspaper, and they had a big article, and they said the region of Niagara's tax increase was 1.47. So and I remember seeing, I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. So this has got 2 here, and then it's going to 3. So what I'm asking, Ms. DePolifis, does one kind of offset the other?
Okay, so I'm going to refer to this estimate that I've calculated on the 2018 property tax bill. In terms of the region, I'll speak to that first. The overall region, they've increased their budget 2%, so their levy's 2%. That does not mean West Lincoln's going to go up 2%. What happens is the region takes their levy and allocates it based on assessment. In West Lincoln, we've been fortunate because we have assessment growth. I think we've had the highest assessment growth in 2018, which can be seen because we have 222,000 in growth. What that means is for West Lincoln, when they levy our township and then we insure and levy all the taxpayers, our share is going to go up. So I've estimated that, no, we're not going to get a 2% increase, probably get a 3% increase. And once all the tax rates are actually finalized by the region, it might be a 4. I don't know. Those rates aren't out. We estimate it. What this council votes on is the municipal levy. What I work on is the municipal levy. I cannot control the regional levy. So this chart here shows you the municipal levy for the average homeowner is increasing $26 in the rural area. If you're in the urban area, it will increase $30. That's for an average. We use an average so we can give a person an idea of what the increase is going to look at on their bill. I hope that answered your question.
Through you to Ms. DePolifis. So the assessment growth that you said will help to decrease the tax levy, but the region could possibly, I know you don't know what that number is, but say it's 4%. Would that offset what you've gained on the growth assessment?
What the region does will never offset our township levy. Our township levy is our township levy. It never changes what we collect for the township.
Oh, I didn't mean it that way. I meant kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, is what I'm trying to say. Is whatever the impact is, in other words, if the region portion, which is 54%, is higher because of the fact that the assessment of the growth in the West Lincoln is increasing that number, does that value that they charge us at 54% offset the savings that we had for the assessment growth of our 31% for the municipality? Am I?
I think
no?
I think what the treasurer's saying is very simple. We deal with our taxes.
And they deal with theirs.
They deal with theirs. We combine the two, and at the end of the day, that's what we got. We can't tell them what to set their rates at, and they don't tell us what to set ours at. So again, I think what we're being told, if we listen, is that it's combined. We set ours, they set theirs, we add them together at the end of the day. That's our overall rate increase.
Yeah, I understand the principle of it. I'm just wondering if they kind of
there's
tit for tat and erased each other. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Your mind they might, but I don't believe
Through you,
do.
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Mayor. Do you know anything about this 1.47?
Yes, I do. I believe it's 1.47, and I do believe there was another 0.5 added on there for a special infrastructure levy. So I think it's just below 2%. I can tell you this, I believe that the overall budget average for the 4 years, I believe, came in from the region at 1.7%. That's the overall average, 1.7, 1.8. Thank you.
Okay. One last, if you don't mind. In answer to Councillor Trombetta's, he is correct. Last year, I did support at the 3.5 with the 5.1 of the MERS going in. It was a meeting about 3 weeks ago that we had with Ms. DeFilippis when she went over the draft of this, and we started talking about where the allocations go, such as the MERS, and it goes into the base. And the base hit me a little while later saying, what does that mean? Does that mean it's compounded over the next 29 years? And the answer to that is yes, and the operation and capital does the same thing every year. So it also affects whatever number's in for the MERS, and it increases the number and makes it larger. So then I started to think, okay, so how does that affect, like, me personally? So I looked at my property taxes from 2016 and from 2017 and how much more I paid, and I went, oh, it works out to 7.8%. So it wasn't 3.5. The impact of the 5.1 and the 3.5 is 8.6. The growth assessment dropped it to about 90.7% and made it 7.8. So that's when I realized that, holy mackerel, this is significant, and with another 5.1 this year and 5% next year, that number is going to increase dramatically.
Your question is what?
Like I said, I don't necessarily have to make a question.
Okay, so your point is what?
So
We've been down that road.
So my point is, that's the answer that I have to Councillor Trombetta.
Thank
was
you.
how it worked out that way. It was very significant and very surprising.
Good. Thank you. Mayor Joyner.
He didn't have a hand up there.
Oh, I thought you did. Okay, Dave, yeah, he did. Yeah, I've got them.
So, ladies first.
Okay, we've tossed around a lot of numbers. I wanted actually to ask, through you, Mr. Chair, for our director of our acting CAO and our clerk, if you would please give Mr. Cosby some kind of an explanation in terms of the explanation that was given to us about insurance and whether it would affect his fire insurance if the trucks were beyond a certain age or...
Through you, I could do that, but maybe it would be appropriate to do it during the fire discussion.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Part two. Okay, Councilor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure that we do understand that we can make some comment. I know we want to move through a point and stuff like that, so I want to make sure that we do have the opportunity to make comments.
We're going somewhere with it.
Good. I think just to help a little bit with the discussion, whenever we add anything to a budget, anything new, and in this case the MERS is the one on the discussion, assessment growth will always be kind of an offsetting to the budget as a whole. It's not necessarily something that you match against a particular item like a MERS or two truck drivers. It's a contributing factor to the overall number, but it's not something that you say, oh, well, we got this assessment growth, we'll apply it to X. It's just part of the equation. So I think Councillor Rayner is starting to understand that a little bit. It's not necessarily a one-to-one ratio. For example, we could have zero assessment growth, in which case, without changing anything to the budget, we're at zero. We could have the assessment growth. We would have, without changing any service levels, we could have a decrease. And again, if we had a 0% increase and some assessment growth, we would be able to increase service levels. But if the region came in with 3% and somebody came to us, my tax bill went up, we could say, talk to the region. So in other words, there's all kinds of things that need to play out, and that's what Councillor Chichok was alluding to. With respect to understanding where things are growing and where they're not growing. Probably one last thing that I just kind of want to get onto the record, and that is the people in the rural areas, those landowners in rural areas, most of the cash croppers, people who own larger tracts of land, were hit with an impact, an MPAC. They were impacted by MPAC disproportionately. So there was a shifting of the tax burden to those rural landowners. That's undeniable. So I think that if we understand that that was beyond our control, but recognize that there was these particular increases that have been happening, and they've been with regards to a number of things, and it's a little simplistic to single out MERS out of that equation, but even 2 truck drivers this year are impacting the rural landowners disproportionately, and the tax burden shifted away from some of the people sitting in the rural. That's just a reality. Some of those assessments went down. They definitely went up if you owned tracts of land, you know, say more than 1 acre or 3 acres in the rural side. So that's just a reality. Again, if we have that information around the horseshoe and people's express concerns about tax increases, their tax bill going up, we certainly can be accountable for our portion, and we can give an explanation. And Donna, the Director of Finance, has given us very clear books. And again, say it again, from this corner of the horseshoe, thanks for their hard, diligent work. But other areas are beyond our control. The impact assessment in rural areas for landowners is not our concern, although it is a part of the explanation that we can give to concerned citizens as well as the regional portion. So just wanted to get that on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the explanation. Mayor Joyner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the questions that was presented, or one of the questions that was asked during the residents who were coming up and presenting to us, delegations, was about the trees and having to do with the industrial wind turbine portion of the money for the trees. And it was referenced that there's a contract that is out there with the MPCA. There is not. But if I could I ask, through you, Mr. Chair, to the acting CAO to just kind of give the answer as to where we are with the trees money at this point in time?
Through you to members of council, that is an item that is yet to be dealt with. The previous CAO had started to deal with it, and we will be looking at it shortly, but it's not on the table at this time. There was some discussion in the past with the MPCA. That is also something that would have to be rediscussed, but right now there's nothing, and it will be dealt with shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get an answer out on that. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Okay, while we're speaking of impact and the impact of MPAC, I would like to say that although the country area was just done recently, and last year that was a big effect, that it certainly also affected the rural areas that were done previously to that. I would like to ask you, Mr. Chair, if I could, Ms. DeFilippis, I don't want to prolong the urban versus rural thing, but presently when we're looking at our tax base, do you have a guesstimate or a best evaluation of the percentage of taxes that would be received from urban residents, so-called urban, whether it be Wellandport or Casterville or Smithville, Hamlet residents versus rural?
Through you, Councillor Bell, no, I don't have a breakdown by area of the taxes collected. I have it by tax class, but not geographically. That would have to be something I would have to bring back at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here's the process. We're looking for money right now for the budgets, and yet this is saying we got $72.5 million sitting somewhere that we could use. I know I'm reading this wrong,
but can you please explain what that means? Because this says surplus. Where is it?
Through you, Chairman Bell. So page 12 of the report starts to speak about Regulation 284-09. So what that regulation addresses is our budget is done, and every municipal budget really, they're done on a cash basis because they're done to calculate what levy do we have to raise in a given year in order to provide services. However, when we report and complete our financial statements, that's done on a PSAP set of accounting rules, which is Public Sector Accounting Board rules, which are quite different than what is presented in front of you. One of the major differences is the definition of what a surplus is, what an accumulated surplus is. Under PSAP, an accumulated surplus is the value of all our assets. So yeah, we have a huge value of assets. That's not cash that's ready to be spent. So that's what this is referring to. It's the value of all our assets. We have to put this note in because we have to address the fact that we do not budget for amortization and we do not budget for the expense of post-employment benefits. So it's a reporting requirement that we include this, but that's just to clarify what we mean by accumulated surplus. I wish we had that money.
Councillor Renner.
Board.
And the only thing that I've left, had you had that word asset in there anywhere, I wouldn't have asked the question. It just says surplus, accumulated surplus. I'm thinking, wow, we don't have any good bank accounts on that.
Wishful thinking. Any more questions, comments? Okay, call the question. Councilor Trevetta, did you want to do resolution to reduce the CIP, or are you okay with it?
It's going to give me some truck drivers.
We got them.
You know, I don't want to say if it's taken up, then I'm okay with that. I understand, because I get more clarification on the issue, so
Okay, good.
I will leave it.
Oh, okay, all those in favor? The budget.
Oh, the motion on
Part,
the table.
yes, thank you. Certainly. Councilor Arenas requested a recorded vote.
Mr. Chair, I'm allowed to vote on this portion of it, correct?
Yes, you
Thank
are.
you.
This is yours. It's the next one.
Councilor Bilsma?
In favor.
Councilor Chichak? Yes. Councilor Gann? In favor. Councilor Rayner?
I'm in favor of the operating capital motion, but not of
You can't, it's, Councilor Arenas, it's either you are or you aren't.
the, well, I said it's operating capital, so if we don't operate in this corporation ceases to exist, so we have to.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Well, you either are in favor of the motion on the table or amend it.
Thank you.
Councilor Chichak?
Support.
Mayor Joyner?
In favor.
Councilor Bell?
In favor. Carries? Yes, it carries. Just going to call a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back for the second portion. Okay? Okay?